What's going on, you guys? Welcome back to the Neighborhood Podcast. I'm host of the podcast. My name is Kyle Dabro.
What's going on, everybody? Other half of the podcast, Kevin Valentin here, coming to you fresh off the new microphone. What's going on, Kyle? How you doing, bro?
Kevin, I know you're feeling yourself right now with the new microphone. Bro, I gotta
Oh,
ask,
you know.
how you liking it so far?
I mean, aside from it taking us like 3 hours last night to get the audio configurations taken care of, I'm loving it, bro. I feel official. It looks official. It's a dream come true, man. Can't exaggerate. Super, super excited.
Yes, sir. Love to see it. But now that Kevin's all giddy, he's got his new equipment. Bro, we got some topics to dive into. You ready to get to this?
Oh, you already know.
All right. So, first things first, we're going to go over some of the NBA second round games. The second round started this weekend. We had some pretty solid games to go over. The first one being the Bucks and the Celtics. The Bucks won game one in pretty decisive fashion. Giannis and Jrue Holiday really led the way. So we'll start off the episode with that. After that, we'll kick it to the Western Conference. We'll focus on the Warriors and the Grizzlies. An amazing game, a back and forth game, but the Warriors did get the win on the road to go up 1-0 in the series over the Grizzlies. That'll be a fun topic to go over. Just a great game overall. And then after that, we'll kick it over to some of the games that are going to take place on Monday. And really the biggest one that Kevin and I have picked is the matchup between the Dallas Mavericks and the Phoenix Suns. We're going to dive into the Luka Doncic and Devin Booker matchup that really seems to be the featured matchup going into this game. Should be a fun topic of discussion. And then after that, we'll kick it over to the NFL draft. The NFL draft took place this weekend, so the draft is officially over. And now we're basically going to sit back and we're going to pick our winners and losers from this weekend's past draft. And then we'll kick it over to the MLB, where we get to talk about Kevin's team for a little bit. The New York Yankees are on fire right now. They've won 9 straight games, and they had a pretty solid road series against the Royals, where they just dominated them from beginning to end. And as it stands right now, the Yankees are the best team by winning percentage in the MLB at this current moment in time, and we'll dive into how significant that is, even though that are only a month into the season. But that is the agenda that we have for you guys. So let's not waste any more time. Let's dive into the Boston Celtics and the Milwaukee Bucks game. So, like I said at the top, the Bucks won Game One over the Boston Celtics by the score of 101-89. It was a pretty decisive road win for the Bucks. It was kind of a back and forth game in the first half, but the Bucks made some good second half adjustments and extended their lead to double digits in the second half, and were able to maintain it for the most part throughout the second half. And for Milwaukee, I imagine they have to be feeling pretty good to be able to go on the road and essentially dominate Boston on the defensive side of the ball, just because Boston was held under 90 points, which by today's standards in the NBA, if you hold a team under 100 points, it's a pretty solid effort from beginning to end. So, Kevin, to kick this one to you, with the Bucks winning game one against the Boston Celtics, who really stood out from that game from the Bucks perspective?
So, I mean, I'm just going to come out and say, we all know that Giannis is the main focal point of that offense. Chris Middleton has been ruled out for the entire second round with an MCL sprain. So you have to look to other options and other players to step up. Jrue Holiday fit that bill, and he stepped up and dropped 25 points today. 9 rebounds, 5 assists. Obviously, we do know that the physical presence of Jrue Holiday is probably the most important piece, and he also contributed 3 steals. So when you look at it from the perspective of next man up, the guy after that stepped up, Bobby Portis, 6 of 12 from the field, 11 rebounds, 15 total points, and a plus minus of 11. So you look at it and you say there were contributing factors from multiple people on this team, including Grayson Allen, including Pat Connaughton, who only contributed 8, but a plus minus of 10 with 5 rebounds and whatever have you. So there were some other players on this team that were able to contribute to the success of the team. But like Kyle had alluded to, you have to really sit here and you highlight the defensive presence that is Milwaukee, because overall Milwaukee held Boston to 33% from the field. That is absolutely unacceptable. And you really look at it and you say, how is this the same team that just swept Brooklyn? How is this the team that went out there and dominated Kyrie and KD? Because outside of Jason Tatum's 21, and that was a struggling 21 with going 6 of 18 from the field, Marcus Smart leaves the game, but he was 3 of 11. Jaylen Brown was 4 of 13. Al Horford was 4 of 11. So you're like, wait a minute. The people that were cooking all series long last series Granted, Brooklyn's defense isn't the greatest, but you look at it, you say, hopefully that would have transitioned into the next round, and the complete opposite happened. Nobody could really get into a rhythm. Jason Tatum had a pretty awful first half, so you look at it and you say they were already behind the eight ball. Obviously, you look at it efficiency wise from Milwaukee's side, they didn't necessarily have an efficient day either because Giannis was 9 of 25, and then Jrue Holiday was 8 of 20. So it wasn't like somebody went out there and cooked them at an efficient or overly accelerated rate, but the team was able to maintain a good enough lead, force some turnovers, and then dominate on the defensive glass. Milwaukee out rebounded Boston. Milwaukee had less turnovers and a better shooting percentage. Usually, in that fashion, in that order, that's going to end up leading you to a successful victory, especially in the postseason. Now, do I expect this to go negatively for Boston for the remainder of the series? I don't, but we don't know the extent of Marcus Smart's injury, and at the same time, we don't know if Boston's going to be able to bounce back offensively with the aggressive defense that we know that Milwaukee has. Kyle and I were talking about it before. The biggest part, who the hell's guarding Giannis? Granted, Giannis had an off night tonight, and he still scored 24 with a plus minus of 23. So you're like, wait a minute, hold on. He had an off night and still had a triple double. That's where I'm kind of worried. That's where I'm going to circle and say Boston is probably going to have to double Giannis the second he crosses half court. If not, right when he gets up to that 3-point line, because you got to eliminate the paint. We all know that Giannis isn't the greatest shooter in the world, and if you have to let him, I guess if you have to let him shoot for the majority of the series, then so be it. And excuse me, I didn't mean double him at half court. I meant double him in the post because obviously you're not going to want to double somebody that doesn't shoot efficiently. So excuse my French there. But overall, it's going to be a good series. It's going to be a tough one. Both teams are very good on the defensive side of the ball. It's just going to be about who has the better offensive game. And with Giannis being that walking mismatch at 6'11", I'm leaning towards Milwaukee early, but don't want to be a prisoner of the moment. Overall, Milwaukee takes this one in Boston, and it's like every other away team in the playoffs, man. If you can steal one on their home court, you're in good place.
Kevin, I think you outlined it pretty well. I mean, just looking at it from what I saw throughout most of the game, the one thing that Boston really couldn't handle was Giannis and Jrue Holiday. Those were really the two standouts as far as I'm concerned from game one with Milwaukee. And the thing is, I mean, everybody usually expects that Giannis is going to do fairly well unless he's literally doubled and sometimes even triple teamed when a defense just traps him to the point where he has to kick it out. But the fact of the matter is, even when Boston ran their traps against Giannis, he was able to kick it out to Jrue Holiday and some of the other role players that Milwaukee had at their disposal. And in the end, it worked out to Milwaukee's favor just because Boston had to account for that. And I think moving forward, the one thing that I think Boston's going to struggle with throughout this series is dealing with Giannis's size. Granted, Giannis is 6'11", but looking at the matchups that Boston presented him in that first game, I mean, they had a couple different rotations to throw against Giannis. There were times where they threw Jason at him. There were times that they threw Robert Williams at him. There were times that they threw Jaylen Brown at him. And by and large, even though that Giannis didn't like dominate from the field goal percentage aspect, he was still extremely effective down in the paint whenever he got the ball and was able to get to the rim fairly easily. And then really what I think Boston's going to have to make big adjustments to going into the second game of the series is they're going to have to limit their turnovers and they have to slow down Milwaukee in transition because when you look at Milwaukee from this year specifically, they're a top 5 team when it comes to being in transition. And by and large, all the Bucks really have to do is just kick it to Giannis. Let him take 2 dribbles from half court and he's either going to be at the rim, either dunking it or laying it up, or after that second dribble, he could kick it out to guys like Chris Middleton. I know Chris Middleton isn't playing in the series, but he could kick it out to Jrue Holiday, Bobby Portis, Pat Connaughton. And if those guys are given good looks, they can knock down shots fairly consistently. And that's one thing that Boston's going to have to make an adjustment to going into game 2, simply just because they really couldn't stop the Bucks in transition. And then to really compound the situation worse for Boston, Boston couldn't knock down their shots in this game really consistently throughout the entire game. It's like you said, Kevin. Jason got off to a terrible start for Boston. I believe Jason Tatum started 0-5 in this game. And granted, he did knock some shots throughout the latter parts of the first half and going into the second half. but it was a little too late as far as Boston was concerned. And by and large, Boston's going to have to get better production from pretty much everybody. Jaylen Brown, I thought was inconsistent in this game. Marcus Smart was inconsistent as well. Granted, he did have that shoulder injury. I don't think it was relatively serious because he did come back in the game. So that may be something that we have to monitor throughout the series. That shoulder may be a little bit sore, but I imagine he's going to be playing in game two. But the thing that Boston's going to have to contend with is Giannis. And really, when you look at Giannis compared to Boston, Boston really doesn't have great players to match up with Giannis one on one. It's going to have to be a group effort to slow him down. And in this game one, they kind of failed in that aspect. So Boston's going to have to make some pretty solid adjustments going into game two to slow him down. And then that force guys like Jrue Holiday and Bobby Portis to beat them. Granted, Jrue Holiday is very inconsistent at times whenever I've seen Milwaukee play. Sometimes he's really good and sometimes he's really bad. But in this game one, Jrue Holiday really stepped up in a big way. He led the team with Milwaukee with 25 points. And if Milwaukee can get that type of production moving forward in this series, I think that bodes very well for Milwaukee. But it's game one. There's going to be some adjustments from both teams. I wouldn't be surprised when we go to Milwaukee for game three that this series is tied 1-1, just because I can't sleep on Boston's defense. They were literally a top two, if not arguably, the best defense in the NBA this season. So I'm not going to sleep on the fact that they had one bad game. And even when you look at the box score, they only gave up 101 points. I feel like Boston's going to have a better shooting performance in game two. That's going to put them in a more competitive situation going into game two. So overall, good for Milwaukee to get that win on the road to start the series. But I would expect that Boston's going to come back in a pretty significant way in game two. And I wouldn't be surprised if the series is 1-1 after game two.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's going to be a great series. I mean, you have two of the better teams in the Eastern Conference. Obviously, the hype around Boston is unbelievable because of them sweeping Kevin and Kyrie. And then,
Mhm.
Milwaukee just kind of rolling over Chicago, which just Chicago was an inconsistent team all year, especially when it came to playing against competitive real teams in the Eastern and Western conferences, and their record was well under 500. I think it was like what, 2 and something abysmal. Like it was like
Yeah.
absolutely atrocious.
Yeah, it was
The
bad.
point of the point of what I'm getting at is both teams pretty much walked through the first round. Obviously, at the end of the day, Boston is still the number one seed in the Eastern Conference, so you expect this matchup to pretty much be as tight as it is. And like Kyle said, I for sure expect Boston to come back. Ime Udoka is, arguably was a candidate for Coach of the Year with how he was able to turn it around in the second half. I think he'll get those boys ready. I think Jason will come out a little bit more aggressive, as well as Jaylen Brown. I think it's going to be a little bit difficult for Jason to get into a rhythm if Giannis is guarding him the majority of this series, which I think he might have to. So I think that those role players on Boston are going to have to step up because at the end of the day, if Giannis, is kind of walking around Jason Tatum, a former two-time Defensive Player of the Year, or at least one time, that's going to be a difficult thing for him to kind of overcome because Giannis is long, Giannis is strong, he's physical. He's going to be that type of person to kind of get under Jason's skin. I think those next role players are going to have to step up. Peyton Pritchard, Jaylen Brown, Marcus Smart, all those other players. Even how Al Horford's going to have to hit a couple of shots. This series, you can't rely on Jason like you did last series. So that formula is going to have to change. Like Kyle said, not going to get wrapped up in the prisoner of the moment of just one win. But I agree with Kyle completely. This definitely should be tied up going back to Milwaukee.
Yeah, and even if you're Boston in this situation, I mean, you don't really have anybody to match up well against Giannis one on one. I mean, this is really
I
kind
mean,
of a
not many
stretch
not
here.
many teams do.
Yeah, but it's like, I mean, maybe the tallest guy that they have on their roster is what, Daniel Tice, and Daniel Tice is not really what I would consider like an elite defender. And the thing
Not at all.
is that Giannis, I feel like would win that one on one battle pretty easily.
10 out of 10 times.
But maybe we have to look at it from Boston's perspective, saying, well, maybe we just got to put a big on a big here and hope for the best. And I think the one person that we have to kind of focus with Milwaukee, I think we kind of missed him in our analysis, was Brook Lopez. The thing is with Milwaukee, it's one thing to have Giannis, but when you have Brook Lopez as well, I mean, you basically got like two towers down there. And granted, Brook Lopez isn't going to have the offensive impact that Giannis will present, and maybe the defensive presence as well. But overall, you still have to respect the fact that he's a 7-footer in Brook Lopez, and the guy can shoot. He's pretty solid from the free throw line, and overall, he can eat reboards on a consistent basis. So when you're looking at this from Boston's perspective, I mean, that's a tough matchup when you got two 7-footers to deal with, and you really don't have the personnel to match up with them well. So I think that's going to be something that Boston's going to have to make some sort of adjustment to try to counter that, because if both Giannis and Brook Lopez just get busy and are just dominating the paint and knocking down shots, it's kind of a worst case scenario for Boston moving forward. And Giannis was actually hitting some mid range jump shots in that first game too. Like if Giannis can knock down some mid range,
Gonna be a nightmare for Boston.
Boston's in a bind at that point because they have to at least somewhat respect it. I'm not saying that they fully respect it, but they have to respect it somewhat if he's actually knocking down the shots. So
Defensively, you live with a Giannis jump shot, even if it is a mid range, just because the statistics lean in your favor. Like, I will take that over him dunking or laying the ball up for sure.
Giannis hit like a little Dirk shot off his left foot in that game one. That was kind of nice. Usually you don't see it very often. Granted, I wouldn't say it's as graceful as what Dirk did back in the day, but still, it kind of gave me that little Dirk memory of Giannis just hitting that shot off of his left foot. But overall, it's a good win for Milwaukee. It's a good way to start the series, but I think this series is going to be very competitive, no matter who comes out on top in the end. So,
What we like to see, brother.
yes, sir. So, with that said, we're going to transition to our next game that took place on Sunday, and that was the Golden State Warriors beating the Memphis Grizzlies by the score of 117 to 116. This is a great game from beginning to end. The Grizzlies had a chance to knock down a game-winning shot. John Morant had a look at a layup as the time expired, but didn't make it. Hit the backboard pretty hard. I mean, granted, it was a contested layup, but he threw it a little heavy off the backboard, and that gave Golden State the 1-0 series lead, and to get a road win early on in the series. That's a good look for Golden State moving forward. But really, the biggest player, as far as I'm concerned, when it comes to Golden State in this game one, was Jordan Poole. He led the team with 31 points. And granted, I know we give Steph and we give Clay a lot of shine, but really Jordan Poole was the one that carried it to the promised land for Golden State in this game one against Memphis. Now, Kevin, to kick this one to you, with the Warriors winning game one on the road against the Grizzlies, just how pivotal was Jordan Poole's success against the Grizzlies in game one?
I mean, we've been saying it all year. Obviously, at this point, Jordan Poole is one of the better players in the NBA as of recent. If I'm not mistaken, he did win Most Improved Player. No, that was John Morant, right? And then he gave that
Yeah.
to Desmond Bain.
Mm-hmm.
But definitely a player that should have been included in that conversation just because of how dominant he's been, especially in the postseason. I mean, the man was an assist and 2 rebounds away from a triple double coming off the bench. Like, that's just nuts. The man was 12 of 20, very efficient, shot 50% from 3, 5 of 10, logged in 38 minutes, and was able to really, really give Golden State a spark. This kid is no 3-year player. He plays like he's a 9 or 10-year veteran. He plays at a very high level. He plays confident, and he has a certain kind of swagger to him that, I've been seeing a lot of tweets, believe it or not, Kyle, where it's like he's very 2013 Steph-esque, very, very young, kind of coming onto the scene, where he was kind of shadowing Monte Ellis early on in his career. And, Monte didn't really accept Steph from what the rumors show, and that's why Monte got shipped off. And getting a lot of young Steph vibes from this guy. He can kind of do it all. I'm not saying he's the greatest defender in the world, but he even had 2 blocks today. The kid is talented. He's really, really confident, and I like it. And, without Jordan Poole, clearly, they don't win this game because without his 31 points, it's a blowout. But, Steph was struggling from the field. He was 8 of 20. Klay Thompson's been kind of having a rough go at it. He was 6 of 19. Andrew Wiggins was 6 of 14, so just shy under 50%. He really carried this team to kind of like that above average level, that Golden State level, to where you say there's always somebody that stands out. there's always someone that shoots the lights out, and you're like, damn, that guy's nasty. And Jordan Poole, low key, is coming out to be the third splash brother. And I'm not sitting here saying that Memphis had a shit game because Morant was, I believe, one rebound away from also having a triple double. Yeah, it was one rebound. He had 34, 9, and 10. He also had 3 steals. So it's like Ja did everything he could do. Jaren Jackson Jr. had 33 points and 10 boards. Like, it wasn't that Milwaukee wasn't able to keep up. The ball just didn't bounce their way, like Kyle said, in that last second shot attempt. But both teams went at it. I mean, outside of the first quarter, each quarter was close. It got out of hand. Golden State went on a run, and then of course at the end of the day, they were able to hold it off. Clay hit a three to kind of put them up one, and it's usually how it goes. One of those three guys this season has hit a shot to put Golden State in a place to where they're either up or put them back into a game. And man, it's insane. That death lineup that Golden State has been running lately. I mean, excluding Draymond's ejection early on in the first half, you could make the argument that that lineup might be the scariest lineup in the league. And I know that we say that a lot with Golden State because they ran a lineup with Kevin Durant, Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Draymond Green, and Andre Iguodala, and everybody was like, that lineup is a death lineup. And now you have Andrew Wiggins, Draymond Green, Jordan Poole, Steph Curry, and Klay Thompson, and it's just as scary. So this team took one, and just like the last series we talked about, your job as the away team in the playoffs is to at least take one away from the home court advantage, and hopefully win back to back at home. So I know that when they go back to the Chase Center, it'll be interesting. Hopefully the Warriors can continue their dominance. I do like the fact that their championship window has not closed. I have been on that bandwagon for a little bit as well, kind of jumping to the defense of Steph Curry the last couple of seasons without his running mates and his partners and his own injuries. They haven't really been able to get into a rhythm. They're finally healthy and hitting a stride at the right time. And I think that this series, just like the last one we talked about, is going to be one for the ages because you have two emerging stars and Morant, Jordan Poole really going out there and trying to show what they can do and leading their teams. And obviously, each team has their own fair share of veterans, but I think Golden State can find a way to squeak this out. But I also think that this game could potentially go 6 or 7 games. So definitely excited to see where this can go in the Western Conference semifinals.
Yeah, I mean, when I look at this game from beginning to end, I mean, this is just one of those games where it's so evenly matched, and really one point was the difference that separated, one team winning and one team losing. So it's not like I could look back at this game and say like the Grizzlies, like they like sucked in this game. Like they were in it from beginning to end. I mean, they got off to a great start in the first quarter. Golden State made a little bit of a push in the second quarter, but really Golden State made that push in the third quarter. That was really the difference maker. And then after that, it was really just back and forth in the fourth quarter. But it's the one thing about Golden State. They just have that championship pedigree. And I think that's what separates them from a team like Memphis. Not to say that Memphis is like trash or anything like that. Memphis is in the 2 seed, for God's sakes. It's just Memphis is still relatively young as a unit. Golden State's been there. They've done that. They've won multiple championships. Granted, it's been a while, but they just have the veteran presence. But when it comes to Jordan Poole, Kevin, I know you and I have talked about him a lot this season. He's really kind of been that X factor for Golden State this year. I mean, if he keeps playing like this, I mean, eventually, I'm not talking about right now, but like down the road, I mean, he could even start outshining like Klay Thompson as Golden State's second best player behind Steph, because when he's putting up over 30 points consistently in these playoff games, I have to kind of give him credit for that. Granted, Klay is still, you know, one of the original Splash Brothers, but Klay's been struggling so far this series. But Jordan Poole, he's been outstanding so far. And the thing is, Jordan Poole really kind of represents that next wave for Golden State, just because I mean Steph, Klay, Draymond, they've been with the Warriors for so long. They've been with Golden State for over a decade. And even though that they're still playing high caliber basketball, you can tell that Golden State's kind of playing this smart from a front office perspective. They're allowing these young guys to get their shine and to get good solid minutes in these big playoff games. And I got to give Steve Kerr some credit for being able to integrate Jordan Poole into the mix, and he's taking full advantage of these opportunities and making it happen. Just because, typically Steph's going to get a lot of looks from the opposing defense, And granted that there's a lot of pressure that comes with that, but when you have somebody like Jordan Poole take some of the pressure off Steph's shoulders and he comes through with flying colors, that makes Golden State a really scary team moving forward. And it's like Kevin said, I fully expect that this team's championship window is not closed. It is still open, and it could even be more open than it has been like the last 2 or 3 years, just because, when you look at this roster from top to bottom, granted, Steph, Clay, Draymond, those are the clear veterans. Like they're in like their mid 30s at this point. But I'm looking at like Jordan Poole, Gary Payton the second, maybe throw Andrew Wiggins in there, um, Damian Lee, Kevon Looney, and even when James Wiseman does get back eventually, may not be this postseason, but when he comes back next year, Golden State is really set up for the future with the rotation that they have with these young guys right now. So all in all, like this Golden State team, it's a good mix of veteran presence and youth. And I think by and large, moving forward, this team is going to be a very scary team to deal with. I don't rule out the possibility that they can make the finals this year, but I do expect the Grizzlies to make this a series with Golden State. I don't think Golden State is going to cakewalk through this series in any way, shape, or form. Granted, the Grizzlies did have a difficult time beating the Timberwolves in the first round, but by and large, the Grizzlies are going to be in it from beginning to end. And despite whatever you can say about the Grizzlies are just a gritty team. They don't give up, despite how many points they may be down, and they're going to give whatever team they're going up against everything that they've got. And I imagine they're going to push Golden State in this series. Granted, it may not be enough in the end, but they're definitely going to give Golden State a real run for this series when it's all said and done. And I expect that the Grizzlies are going to make a solid competitive push in this game too to even up the series. I wouldn't be surprised if Ja goes out there and has another 25, 30-point performance. But I think by and large, the Grizzlies missed some shots. And I think they'll make those adjustments going into game two. I got to see a little bit more from Desmond Bain. He did not have that good of a game in game one. Same goes for Dylan Brooks. Usually, when those guys are hitting, that's what really makes the difference for the Grizzlies moving forward. If those guys can knock down some shots going into game two, I think it will serve them well and it will really make this series competitive um, throughout its entirety. So, by and large, good on Golden State for getting this win on the road in game one. But Memphis is going to be right with them throughout this series. That's just how I see it.
Dude, again, another great series. I couldn't ask for a better one, realistically. And I know that obviously the next one is going to be my series to really talk about in the Western Conference. But, dude, Ja Morant, Jordan Poole, obviously Jaren Jackson Jr., Steph Curry, and Klay Thompson, Dylan Brooks. Granted, one of these teams is a bigger veteran than the other. But when you really look at it overall, they're performers. They know how to do what they need to do to put on a show, make it a competitive game for all parties. And you really look at it and you say, you can kind of make this like what's the phrase I'm trying to look for or the analogy? It's like David versus Goliath to an extent because like one team has this championship pedigree like you mentioned and the other one is young up and coming and like looking to be where they were just a few years ago before they started their championship dynasty in 2015 and it's just one team is prolifically focused on shooting the basketball and obviously having, multiple Hall of Famers on that roster. And then the other one is mainly focused in doing a lot of their work inside the paint, dominating down low, and then doing what they need to do to kind of get that physical, scrappy kind of rebounding atmosphere and, have the occasional jump shot, with Dylan Brooks and Desmond Bain. But overall, two different makeups, two different teams going at it for a chance at the Western Conference Finals. I could not be happier that these two teams are facing off.
Well, yeah, and it's really kind of an interesting matchup just because you really have a situation where Golden State is, I would say, probably the more older but more experienced team. But Memphis, like these are the new kids on the block, and it's their opportunity. Like it's their time to shine. And even though that, if I had to expect like how this series is going to play out, I would still favor Golden State over Memphis. That's not a slight against Memphis. It's just that Memphis. I think they're still kind of learning the ropes of what it comes to play playoff basketball. You could tell in that first series against the Timberwolves, Minnesota really gave them a run for their money because I mean Minnesota squandered 3 games of double digit leads, and I think in one like the highest like lead that Minnesota had in one of their games was 26 points, and they squandered that one against Memphis. You could tell that Memphis definitely got a wake up call from the Wolves in the first round of the playoffs. But I think in this series, I think Memphis knows who they're going up against. They know that Golden State's got sharpshooters, and they got some nice young talent like in Jordan Poole and Gary Payton II. That can be a difference maker for Golden State moving forward. So I feel like Memphis is much more well equipped to deal with Golden State than they were against Minnesota. I think it was because I think they may have underestimated Minnesota a little bit, and I think that worked against them. But I don't think that's the situation here. I think Memphis knows who they're going up against, and even though there was a 1 point loss, I mean, it's tough to lose a game by 1 point. I mean, you were literally right there with an opportunity to win the game. But I do think that with the proper adjustments and just some other guys stepping up like Dylan Brooks and Desmond Bane, that could literally be the difference maker. It's just, it's Golden State. You know, these guys have been there. They've done that. But Memphis is going to give them a run for their money. I fully believe that. It may end up falling short for Memphis in the end, but I think they're going to give them a push. It's definitely how I see it playing. But, well, now we get to talk about Kevin's team, the Dallas Mavericks. The Dallas Mavericks are going up against the Phoenix Suns. So we got the 1-seeded Suns going up against the 4-seeded Mavs. And when you look at this matchup from a bigger perspective, this is going to be a very good matchup, no matter how you slice it. And what we're going to focus on specifically is the matchup between Luka Doncic and Devin Booker. These are really the two young studs that have been playing lights out throughout their relatively short NBA careers up to this point. Luka's only 23 years old. Devin is 25 years old. But these are really some big name players that are going to be potentially faces of the NBA if they're not already moving forward very soon. This is going to be a fun series no matter how you look at it. But Kevin, I got to ask you, with Luka Doncic and Devin Booker featured in this Mavericks Suns series, who do you think has the edge to put their team on top when it's all said and done?
As I normally do, I try to think bias aside. Um, I think Devin's got the edge because Devin's got the running mate that is the future Hall of Famer, the point guard, arguably one of the, if not the greatest point guard of all time, in Chris Paul. With Luka being the focal point of the offense, Luka being the X factor, pretty much Luka being the sole recipient of all the Dallas Mavericks pressure over the last 10 years since we've won a championship, or 11 years, should I say. Um, that's where the difference is. Devin can relay or kind of rely on CP when he's cold. Devin can lean on Chris Paul when he's having an off night to kind of get him back into it. Luka Doncic is our whole offense. Luka Doncic is that person that says, like, give me the ball, I'm going to take this shot. And sometimes Luka's ego is what shoots us out of certain games. Now, I'm not saying that it wasn't because of Luka Doncic that we won the last series, but you also have to remember Jalen Brunson is also in his third postseason or second postseason or whatever have you, and he's actually been able to step up massive. So I can't say that Luka is now alone, but when you look at it from like, well, Devin Booker's got all stars with him as opposed to Luka's pretty much playing by himself. So I will definitely say that Devin's got a bigger kind of a bigger role to play here, but in terms of importance, I would say that Luka's more important for the Mavericks because, like I just reiterated, um, the entire team runs through one player. All the offense, when everybody is kind of just standing still, it's pretty much a Luka Doncic ISO or Luka Magic, as the Mavs announcers like to kind of just call it. And that's where I start to worry. That's where I start to panic. I also do not feel like the Mavericks match up well. The Suns have pretty much 3 7-footers, and DeAndre Ayton, JaVale McGee, and then you have Bismack Biyombo that they acquired later in the season, whereas the Mavericks pretty much just have Maxi Kleba and Dwight Powell in rotation for the center position. And, when we do small ball, Dorian Finney-Smith runs the 5. We were able to kind of run Utah off the floor with our smaller lineup because they were worried about the mismatch. But I do believe that DeAndre Ayton is a great defender, so they will find a way to adjust and kind of beat us up in the post because that's where we are weakest on the defensive side. Obviously, Monty Williams and Chris Paul are going to be like decisive geniuses with the basketball, and they're going to know where they want to attack and what spots they want to get to. But man, Devin Booker's scary. Pending, God forbid, a tweak of his hamstring. I think Devin's going to go off. I don't really think we have anybody that's going to be able to disrupt his offense as much as we would like. Dorian Finney-Smith has been playing great. Reggie Bullock's been playing great. All defensive players. Josh Green had a couple of instances in the Utah series where he stepped up and had a couple of steals. So we have talented defenders. I just don't know if they're talented enough to go out and guard one of the best players at 25 and under, or 25 and I said it right, 25 and under, because Luka's also in that list. So it's going to be a tough matchup for both teams to stop both individual superstars. But if I had to give an edge, I would probably say that Devin Booker is going to be a little bit more important because he doesn't have as much pressure on his shoulders when you have Chris Paul as a teammate.
I mean, this is kind of a tricky one for me because the way that I look at it, like, I understand where you're coming from with the whole Devin Booker perspective. And the way that I kind of read that is the Suns are the better team than the Mavericks. But when it comes down to like utter importance for their own team, I have to give the edge to Luka. And it's kind of like you said, it's, by and large, the Mavs offense is solely run through Luka. And to a certain extent, that may work, as far as like Luka is concerned, because he's able to produce at a large clip. But it also can work against them because their offense can look stagnant. And even though they beat the Utah Jazz in that first round, there were times when Luka was running the offense and guys were just standing around waiting for Luka to make a move. And sometimes Luka would throw a shot up, or maybe he would pass it out, and then they would be able to knock down the shot. But the Mavericks offense can get very one dimensional when Luka's running the show. So, I mean, to pick a player, just based off of how I see this series playing out, I'm gonna say that Luka actually has the edge over Devin, but I think that the Suns have the edge over the Mavs. And this is how I'm gonna break it down. The reason why is I think that Luka is gonna be dynamite in this series against the Suns. I believe that he's going to go out and score consistently around 25, 30 points a game. And I wouldn't even be surprised if he puts up like a 35 or even a 40-point performance, just because the one thing that I can't sleep on with Luka is if he's able to just to get like a smidge of space against his defender, he could hit a step back three and cash it 50, 60% of the time when given the right space. When it comes to those little more contested shots, then he's a little bit more inaccurate. But I mean, overall, you know, I think the Mavs are going to have to solely, rely on Luka to score at least 25, 30 points a game if they want to be viable in this series. Maybe you could look to some other guys like Jalen Brunson. Jalen Brunson was really, I think, the unsung hero against the Jazz for the Mavs in that first round matchup because he was the guy that dropped 41 points in game two that saved Dallas from going down 2-0 in that series early on. And then he was able to chip in some pretty significant moments for Dallas when Luka came back into the fold. So, I think when you look at Luka's perspective here, Luka's definitely going to have to feed Jalen Brunson and Spencer Dinwiddie and Dorian Finney-Smith consistently as far as the facilitator aspect goes to make Dallas a more viable team. Now, to kick it over to the Suns, I mean, Devin Booker's importance is extremely vital here. I mean, granted, he is dealing with a hamstring issue. I don't know how big of a factor that's going to be moving forward because he was able to come into the Suns later in that first round series. But if they're able to run some effective pick and rolls with Dev, and if Dev's able to get some space behind the 3-point line, I mean, he's a knockdown shooter. And when you have somebody like Chris Paul who's facilitating the ball just with his essentially what I would call it just like wizardry skills at that position where he can find guys open just based off of some easy pick and rolls and just find guys in good spots. I mean, Devin can go out there and score 30 points when given the right opportunities every night. So, by and large, the Suns are the better team. They were the best team in the NBA this year. They had over 60 wins. Devin Booker was a huge piece of that. And I imagine that he's going to have a major impact for this series for the Suns moving forward. And then when you talk about all the role players that the Suns have, DeAndre Ayton's going to be pivotal for them. Um, you look at like Mikal Bridges, Cameron Johnson. I mean, these guys are going to have to play A+ basketball for the Suns to advance to the Western Conference Finals. But I think when it comes to specifically this Luka versus Devin matchup, I'm going to give the edge to Luka simply just because I think he's going to be the more pivotal force for their respective team. But overall, I do see the Suns having the advantage just because I think that the Suns are a more well-rounded unit. I think they have a better coaching staff because I think Monty Williams probably the best coach from this past season. He was absolutely phenomenal this year. And I think when you combine those factors together, just based on how the Suns operate as a team, I do have the Suns winning this series over the Mavs when it's all said and done. But I can't sleep on the Mavs here. The Mavs played extremely well in some big clutch moments against the Jazz in the first round of the playoffs. And if they play their cards right, they can make this a series. They could push us to 6 games, possibly even 7, if they were able to get 3 wins. But I do have the Suns winning this series when it's all said and done. I just think they're a better team, and that's just how I see it.
I mean, obviously, the Suns being the number one overall team in the Western Conference and in the NBA speaks volumes in and of itself. Devin Booker having the season that he did, being an MVP candidate. Chris Paul before he was injured, obviously being in that MVP conversation. Mikal Bridges being in the Defensive Player of the Year conversation. DeAndre Ayton is obviously in a contract year for a prove it to get his Supermax extension. And, the list of players just kind of goes on and on and on. Cameron Johnson, Cameron Payne, and so many people that have been able to step up, as well as were big pivotal pieces in their championship run last year where they just fell short against Milwaukee. Dallas hasn't been in any of those predicaments. Dallas hasn't been in any pivotal games, meaningful games. I mean, for God's sakes, this is our first series win since 2011. This is the first time we've been in the second round in over a decade. So they're not going to be familiar with that adversity. Luka looks at it as another opportunity for me to show the world that I am the man. And, Chris Paul knows better than that. Devin Booker knows better than that. They know that if they're not having it that night or if they're kind of off, they have people to lean on. I don't necessarily know if Luka does. Again, I'm not trying to sound like I hate, my team's best player. I'm not trying to sound like I'm not grateful for Luka being on my team, but I've said it to Kyle for years now. Sometimes our offense looks so much better when Luka's not on the floor because the ball movement is incredible. It is not 20 seconds of dribbling between the legs, in and out, back and forth, step back three at the end of it, for him to go out there and shoot 35% from the 3-point line. I know what you're saying. It's a pretty high percentage, but when you take 11 shots behind the 3-point line, that's when you start to look at it and say, well, maybe some of those aren't great basketball shots. When they go in, it's a Sports Center highlight. Everybody gets excited because Luka had hit a step back three over a premier defender. But in a pivotal game, down one, up four, why are you making those plays? Why are you putting the ball up in a position where it puts the team in a predicament? And then in half the time, Luka's complaining to the referee that he was hit or that he was fouled earlier. He doesn't get back in transition defense, and then we're down a man. You can't slack against this Phoenix basketball team. All hands need to be on deck. We need to shoot efficiently, and we need to play as a team. That is where Phoenix succeeds. The pick and roll with Devin Booker and DeAndre Ayton, the pick and roll with Chris Paul and anybody in the world realistically, because he is just a master of that game. It automatically puts Phoenix at an advantage. And again, I will reiterate this until the end of time. We do not have a true center. We do not have a big down in the paint. And when Dwight Powell is our focal point leader as our paint perimeter defender, or our paint interior defender, should I say, that doesn't bode well with me. That doesn't make me very comfortable when DeAndre Ayton lives and breathes in the post. So I'm nervous about this series. Obviously, I agree with Kyle's point to an extent where, Luka is probably going to be more important to my specific team because of the impact that he carries. But, dude, there is zero pressure on Devin Booker because he has a Hall of Famer to lean on. Where Luka knows if Jalen's off, Reggie's off, or the team isn't hitting, I got to put up more shots, even if that means he's got to put up 28, 30 shots a game. So that could help and that could hinder. That's why I'm skeptical about the series overall. I'm just excited that we won a series, to be completely honest with you. But yeah, I'm not too hyped about the potential embarrassment that could come, because let's be honest, in the regular season, Phoenix mopped the floor with us in certain games, and others were close, but there were just games where it was like, yeah, we don't really belong here. Like, they're that much better. So I'm just hoping that enough has changed in that time frame.
Well, I'm just curious at this point. How do you see the series playing out when it's all said and done?
Phoenix 5-5.
You have no faith in your squad. Five,
Bro,
5.
yes, I stand by what I said. Phoenix is that much better. Mikal Bridges is a Defensive Player of the Year candidate that they're going to put on Luka. They have Jamison Crowder or James Crowder, whatever the hell his name is, even though he was drafted by the Mavs. I just can't remember his name right now, who's also a pesky defender. They have plenty of people out there. Cam Johnson can come off the bench and play physical defense. He's about 6'8". He's long. He can defend. Obviously, Chris Paul is a chippy defender, even though he's smaller. We all know that he's great at defending on ball in the basketball. Devin Booker has improved as a defender. There are people that can switch on this team. And if you're going to go and put DeAndre Ayton on an island and try to, get him in foul trouble, you better make sure you finish at the rim. Luka Doncic also isn't the greatest free throw shooter in the playoffs. Granted, he shot solid in the first round, but I am skeptical, man. When Luka's ego is in check and he kind of hits a shot or two in a row, there were a couple times in the Utah series where I was like, bro, you don't need to shoot that. And like they always say in basketball, bro, it was a heat check. He missed, it looked like shit, or, he got upset with the referee. It has nothing to do with the lack of faith. We do not match up well against Phoenix at all at almost every single position. We don't guard the pick and roll very well. We don't have the bench depth that Phoenix does. We have a couple of people that come off here and there that play solid minutes. Josh Green, not an efficient offensive player. Trey Burke, inconsistent at best. Maxi Kleber had 2 big games against Utah, went ice cold for the rest of the series from 3-point range. Dude, Tim Hardaway Jr. is not playing this series from what I'm understanding because he hasn't even been cleared to he hasn't even been cleared to run at full sprints, let alone individual workouts. People are sitting here talking about Tim Hardaway Jr. might come back by game 6 or 7 if he's clear. Bro, the man, according to Jason Kidd in the presser, he hasn't even been cleared to sprint. How in the hell are you going to help me if you can't run? So for that, sit your ass down the bench and get healthy. I don't know, man. Unless Boban's about to come in there and block like 5 shots a game on DeAndre Ayton, but be a complete liability on the other end, I have no idea what's going to happen, bro. I'm really, really scared, but I genuinely think, without being negative, I'm thinking objectively, I don't think we're going to do very well against the Phoenix Suns this year. At least not this year.
In the series.
Yeah.
I have the Suns winning the series. I think just out of just respect for Dallas, I have the Suns winning it in 6. I think you guys will get 2 wins.
I hope so.
think.
I would like us to win the series, quite frankly.
Well, I know that. It's just that I know you're kind of putting your bias aside for this one, which
Yeah.
I can understand. But I think I have Phoenix winning this 6. I think you guys will be able to win. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that you guys win both of your home. And then I think what will happen is that Phoenix will win game 5. Then Phoenix will win on the road in game 6. That's how I kind of see the series playing out. But it would be wild, like if Dallas were to steal a game on the road in Phoenix out of the first game or two. That would be sensational if if you're looking at it from Dallas's perspective. But
it's like I said. Listen, I am a Dallas Mavericks fan to the day I die. To the day I stop breathing. I love this team. I love this franchise. I love the players that have come and gone, and obviously Dirk Nowitzki is my favorite player. We got blessed that Luka Doncic was able to kind of come into those shoes. Ironically enough, being a European player, coming in at a young age and just dominating and taking the league by storm. An MVP candidate, yes. My biggest issue with him is his ego, and it will continue to be his ego until he gets knocked off the horse. He needs to realize it is a team sport in a lot of instances. Sometimes he gets too flashy with passes and he turns the ball over recklessly, trying to do a lot of no looks. Defenses bait him into, leaving somebody open in the corner. They'll shadow the wing and then they'll come off the ball with that weak help and they'll steal it. Luka has to be able to recognize that he is the most important player on our team, yes. But when you don't have it going, you're not a shooter. You're not a Steph Curry. You're not a Klay Thompson that can get back into a rhythm. You make 2 in a row, that doesn't necessarily mean you got to throw it up another 6 times before the half. You need to understand that you also have the ability to penetrate and get into the paint and get to those bigs and finish at the rim and get people included. Don't sit here and give me that old Carmelo Anthony from 2013. You take 18 jab steps, you put the ball between your legs 17 different times, but we all know that you're going to do the step back at the end of it. I need you to drive. I need you to get Ayton in foul trouble. I need you to get people switching and people moving and have that offense running fluid. not standing and watching you. And if Jalen Brunson's got a hot hand, you give him the basketball and let him do what he's got to do. Don't let the fact that he is outperforming you get in your head. Oh, this is my team. Jalen's got 25 and I only got 18. I got to catch up. It's not about that. I want to win. And I want to win to where we look like we are a competent basketball team and not Luka going off every time we got to win and he's got to have 35, 12, and 16 to be relevant. It's just ridiculous to me that that's what needs to happen for us to win when we have a lot of competent players that have done well all year, and the national media is now starting to see that. Oh, Dorian Finney-Smith, I didn't know he could shoot. You don't watch Mavericks games. Who does? You know what I'm saying? I don't fault anybody for not knowing these players. You, Jalen Brunson, I didn't know he had that in him. Well, when he gets enough shots and he makes them, I mean, the man can score 20, 25 a night if he needs to.
Yeah, well, the Jalen thing that caught me off guard was the 41. I mean, I know that Luka was going to be out the first couple games for Dallas. I just didn't know the 40 bomb was going to come from him. I wasn't expecting like that type of output. I mean, Jalen's. There was one play in particular. This was in the game 6 when he had Rudy Gobert in an absolute spin cycle.
On skates, yeah.
Like literally, he gave him everything I could think of in his bag. But when I look at Jalen, I mean, Jalen's a good player that the Mavericks have. But like when you look at it like in the grand scheme, like the totality, I mean, Jalen, like, would you consider him like the second best player that the Mavericks have on their roster?
I mean, with his recent performance, how he's played this season, the leap he took from last year to this year, all his percentages have pretty much gone up. I'd probably say, yeah, realistically. I mean, outside of Spencer Dinwiddie, I would say that, yeah, he's probably the second best player on the team.
Yeah, but I mean, by and large, the last couple of years, it had really been Luka and KP as the two ball dominant players or the two primary players that you first think of when it comes to Dallas. Not to say that Jalen Brunson wasn't putting up numbers. It's just not given enough. He's not given like the opportunities that he's getting now. And that's the difference is that now that he's actually gotten these opportunities, now that KP is out of the picture, now he's actually making the most of it. And that's really like where I like for me, that's where I kind of got caught off guard was because, up until the trade happened when KP got shipped to Washington and then Dinwiddie and Bertans came over to Dallas. Jalen, I thought you would mostly be just like a mid tier, but a solid basketball player. But now that he's actually getting good opportunities to actually, well, I mean, just flat out say it, like actually run the offense when Luka's not on the court, he's doing very well. And I imagine this offseason, I mean, granted, I don't know how much he's going to get paid when his next contract comes up. I imagine he's going to get
I think it's going to be
pretty
22 to 25 a year, in my opinion.
He'll get a pretty penny. So I wouldn't
Dallas
be.
can afford it though, so he's
I,
gone.
I mean, my thing is, I mean, you know how these agents work, bro. They're able to work miracles somehow. I don't know if Jalen could ever get 30 a year,
Nah. I
but
mean the Knicks were willing to, and again, this is just dating it back to the trade deadline. The Knicks were willing to give him the 2021 at the time, and he wasn't playing in the postseason the way he is now. So his market price definitely skyrocketed just based off of the first round. Now, barring he has an absolute atrocious second round, and I'm talking like under
doesn't
15
show
a
up.
game, horrible percent, exactly, doesn't show up, turning the ball over, things like that. I would expect his market price just to continue to go up because the better Dallas does, the better it looks for him because he's performing on a winning team in the time that matters most.
The,
So
the
we don't have the cap or the capital to go out there and give somebody 20 to 25 million dollars a year. I mean, for God's sakes, I'm pretty sure we declined. I think he wanted 18 and we said no. We offered him 55 for 3 or 4 years and that was what 13 or 14 million a season and like that was like an absolute disrespectful like offer to him and he was like I'm good. I'll wait till free agency hits. Like, bro, his number just continued to shoot up.
the only thing that kind of works against Jalen in this perspective is the sample size. You don't really have like, granted, he's been with Dallas for a couple years,
Since
but
Luka got drafted, yeah, this is his third or fourth year.
but by and large, like when he's been in this rotation that the Mavs have had the last couple months, sample size is not that big.
No.
So, compared throughout the first 3 or 4 years of his career, you're maybe looking at, okay, he's been playing out of his mind the last what, 3 months out of the last
I would
four.
listen. The season as a whole, he took leaps and bounds from last year to this year. So I would give him the season to say that he took a jump, but
Okay,
his dominating performance
that's
again has been of late.
that's what I meant. Like when I said he was like playing out of his mind because he's been
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
phenomenal in the playoffs so far. It's
Yep.
just, I mean, like I said, like when he's really like put his like talent and he's making the most out of his opportunities, I would say he's really been playing out of his mind the last 3 months. But I mean, to be fair to you, like I think maybe this year specifically, he's he's definitely taken leaps and bounds. To buffer your point, it's just a team that's gonna bring him on. If he doesn't go back to Dallas, the only thing that I would say is you have like 1 year of a sample size to work with. He actually played pretty solid basketball, but it depends. I mean, we'll see what happens with this series, and we'll see what happens moving forward with him. But if he plays out of his mind this series, and somehow Dallas were able to win this series, I think it all ensures that he's leaving. So, I mean,
Oh my god,
it might
bro.
already be a guarantee at this point already, but
It's a lot of money, bro. I mean, Bertans and Dinwiddie together are getting paid more than KP by himself, and then obviously Luka's got his super max. We just extended Dorian. Reggie Bullock's on a 3-year deal. Tim Hardaway's still got another 3 years left on his deal. Um, Dwight Powell's up for a contract extension. I know that Max Kleber's up for a contract extension, and a couple of other Mavericks that we could potentially see and kind of work through. I think Josh Green's going to be up for an extension too. So it's like it's give one player everything and lose 3 or 4 good role players, or you go and extend the players that are actually contributing, you know, in multiple facets. I don't know how Mark and Nico Harrison are going to do it this offseason. I'm curious. I mean, I expect a couple of people to probably walk, whether that be Sterling Brown, Boban Marjanovic, Trey Burke, and just a couple of random individuals. Theo Pinson will probably get cut just because he doesn't really get any burn at all. If anything, he's not even suited up for the playoffs. So, um, again, an opportunity to see what we're going to be able to do this offseason. But like Kyle said, I do expect Jalen Brunson to be in a different uniform next season for sure.
unless they really make some like, unless they really start focusing on trying to improve their cap situation going into the offseason, try to retain uh, Jalen.
We'll
Maybe
probably make him an offer, but you know as much as I do. Money talks nowadays, and barring us losing in like the NBA Finals, where he's like, this team has the potential to do it again, he'll go somewhere else. Whether that's New York, like they were rumored, because obviously I think his dad was a Knick, and he's from the New Jersey area. He might have some emotional ties over there, or whoever kind of has the most money available, quite honestly. So we'll kind of see how it goes along. But overall, whoever gets him, getting a great player.
I think the most that you guys offer him,
18, 19. I agree completely.
yeah, at most 20. 20 would probably be pushing
And
it.
and that's a super stretch.
Yeah, but I think like max is 20, and then anything
Agreed.
over that, Dallas is just gonna say, it's like, you're gonna find a different team at that point. Because
And Jalen's dad said ain't no hometown discount either. So Dallas is gonna have to pay.
yeah, it would be well worth it if they were able to retain him because that would be a huge piece move if they were.
Dude, I'm gonna lean in what you said too. We got a 1 year sample size to go and say that this was his big break. Usually, especially in recent history, players like him or players in general that get that deal that they've been asking for, it never pans out, man. Like whether or not they fail to perform, they get injured, again, God forbid,
Yeah,
or they don't fulfill the expectations of a 20 to 25 million dollar a year kind of player. That's a lot of pressure on somebody, and people tend to slack off, especially this generation. We've talked about athletes. They get that bag and they kind of like stop trying because they're like, I already got my paycheck. What do I need to try for? And I'm not saying that Jalen is like everybody else, but you tend to look at history and you tend to look at what happens when players like that get the extension that they fought for. I don't think that Nico and Mark are going to be willing to take that gamble for that much money. Truthfully, I don't think he's worth that much. I know that he's definitely worth a lot, but to go out there and say he's one of the better players in the league at 25 million a year, you're crazy.
I wouldn't be surprised if some team offers him that though. I wouldn't be surprised at all.
There
It's
are
just
always gonna be teams that make offers like that. I wouldn't be surprised if some shitty team comes out of left field, like fucking, like an Orlando Magic, even though they have a shit ton of guards. You know what I'm saying? Like, just I'm not saying that that's gonna happen, but there are always teams that have a boatload of money that will make that offer.
well, think of it like this. Who was the guy that left Denver to go to Detroit and got like a huge bag to go?
Denver,
Yeah, playing on Denver
like a
last couple of
guard?
years. Yeah, hold up.
You mean like
This is
Jeremy Grant?
yeah, Jeremy Grant. Like
Yeah,
that's kind of like an example that like kind of comes
Blake
to
Griffin
mind.
did it too.
But it's like even if Jalen were to get a bag, like is he just going for the bag or is he like trying to like actually make like
How many times we
that
talk about
trip where
this?
the
How
oh
many times we talk about this?
I
Always,
totally
bro.
I totally get it. They'll always go for the bag, but I will say, I mean Jalen does have like a decent thing working with Dallas, and they do have I would say a solid roster to work with, but that bag speaks, bro. I'm telling you. So
I agree. I wouldn't be
it's
surprised if he
just
goes to like a Detroit team. Him and Cade Cunningham, two young guards leading a decrepit franchise. I listen. I don't put anything past anybody, bro. I've seen
yeah.
people leave teams like you left a playoff contender for that. Like when Blake Griffin forced his way out of LA and demanded to go to Detroit, and they gave him a supermax.
Yeah.
Kudos to you, bro. Then he got mad that they were losing and demanded to be released.
Hmm.
You asked to go there. Like I hate athletes like that. Oh, I want 100 and some odd million dollars, and I'm willing to go to whatever franchise is willing to give it to me. That team starts to suck, even though you think you're better than what you're worth, and you get mad. I want to go back to a winning culture. Da 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 da. I don't think it's a good fit here. No, you thought with your money sign, you thought with your wallet, and that's what you get. We always say players like that deserve to go to Siberia.
Yeah. But more than likely what they do, like just in private conversation, they probably just have a talk with their agent and say, hey, just find me the biggest deal possible and no matter where it is. It's like that's probably most of the time.
I
Like
don't feel bad then.
yeah, at that point, it's like, all right, you reap what you sow. And then
100%.
you go to Detroit and you just kind of suffer there until you ask to get traded. So it's like,
I don't care. I love Jalen. He's a competitor. He's a winner. Granted, he went to that shitty school that starts with a V, but again, he comes from a winning culture, good family. From again what I've heard, he's been great in the locker room, great teammate. Everybody loves him. So I hate to see him go, but if it came down to a money price that we just can't swing, I can't get mad at the organization. They'll make an effort and an offer, just like we both said, but I don't think that that's going to end up working out for what he wants.
fair enough. Fair enough. But with that said, we're going to transition into some NFL discussions in regards to the NFL draft. So the NFL draft has come to a close. All the teams have made their picks, and now this is the point where Kevin and I we get to pick some winners and some losers from this year's draft. So Kevin, to get this one to you, with the NFL draft now wrapped up, who do you have as your winners from this past draft?
I'm going to go with both New York teams. I'm going to keep this quick. I think that the Jets had probably one of the better drafts. They went out and they got 3 first-round picks over the last couple of years with trading some assets. They got Sauce Gardner, Garrett Wilson, and Jermaine Johnson. That addresses top cornerback position. Sauce is the best defensive player in this draft. You can make that argument, especially at the corner. Ohio State's Garrett Wilson, that three-headed monster that was in Ohio State. Obviously, we know that they needed somebody to stretch the field. They were rumored to go after A.J. Brown, who ended up in Philadelphia. They were looking at DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, and a number of other players, including Deebo Samuel. They go and get Garrett Wilson at 10, and then they go and get a pass rusher with Jermaine Johnson at 26. And then afterwards, the Iowa State running back Brees Hall. They went and got a tight end from Ohio State with Jeremy Ruckert. From Louisiana, they got a tackle, Max Mitchell, and then they went and got another pass rusher, Michael Clemens from Texas A&M. I think that fits a lot of needs. Pass rush, pass protection for Zach Wilson, targets on the offensive end, depth at the running back position, and then they got a for sure solid shutdown corner, which is going to solidify Robert Saleh's defensive vision that I know that he is going to want for his New York Jets coming up this season. This is all just going to simply depend on Zach Wilson's development, but the New York Jets, between free agency and the draft, they look absolutely incredible this offseason, and this draft is going to cap it. Let's just see how it turns out.
Kevin, if I were to pick some winners from this year's draft, I'd have to pick the Baltimore Ravens, and I can't believe I'm actually saying this with a straight face. I have to say the Detroit Lions. The Detroit Lions actually did a fairly decent job in this year's draft. And I know really the Lions are kind of like the butt joke of the NFL typically. But this year specifically in this draft, I actually thought that they did a pretty good job. Let me focus on the Baltimore Ravens first because I thought they had a phenomenal draft. And the one thing that I like about Baltimore is I think they went in with the mindset that they loved this draft class. And one of the things that I remember a lot about the lead up going into this year's draft was there wasn't a lot of focus on like the top tier talent coming out of like the first and second round. But from what I remember, there was a lot of talent that teams had a pretty wide range of players to select from in those middle rounds. So like if you're talking from like the sixth, not the sixth, the third to the sixth round, there was a lot of players where teams could just really just go nuts. And when I look at what the Baltimore Ravens did, they went absolutely nuts from rounds 3, 4, and 6. I mean, for God's sakes, they had 6 picks in the fourth round alone. And really, I thought one of the biggest acquisitions that they got from the draft was Jalen Armour Davis, the cornerback out of Alabama. I think that was an A+ move as far as I'm concerned. Really shores up their corner depth. And not only that, I also thought that the selection of Kyle Hamilton from Notre Dame was a nice one as well. He'll add some nice safety depth for Baltimore's defense, just because when you look at Baltimore, Baltimore is solely reliant on Lamar Jackson to carry this team to the promised land. But on the back end, when it comes to their defense has been known to give up points on a pretty consistent basis ever since, that Ray Lewis era went by the wayside. They've been kind of struggling to maintain a viable defense since his departure. But you could definitely tell that with this draft, Baltimore definitely made a move to try to shore up their defense moving forward because really that's probably the only thing as far as like their specific units go with like offense, defense, and special teams. Their defense was probably the weakest link, but they did a very good job in being able to shore up that side moving forward. Not just this year with this year's draft, but I imagine that those players are going to be pivotal moving forward within the next couple of years for Baltimore. And then to kick it over to Detroit. I thought Detroit knocked it out of the park with their first 3 picks. I mean, they got Aiden Hutchinson, they got Jamison Williams, and they got Josh Pascal. I mean, to get 2 nice edge rushers. I mean, Aiden Hutchinson was considered basically like the top prospect going into this year's draft. Granted, he did go number 2, but I think overall that was a great selection for Detroit. I think when you combine what Aiden will present with Pascal, or I think that's how you say his name, I think that'll be solid moving forward. Not this year specifically, because I think these guys are going to have to learn and develop and get used to NFL type speed. But give these guys a year or two, maybe even 3. I think these guys are going to be solid moving forward. To kick it over to Jameson Williams, Jameson Williams was one of the most touted wide receiver prospects this season or going into this year, and that was despite the fact that he tore his ACL in the college football playoff last year. So all in all, this is a great draft from Detroit as far as I'm concerned. I also like the fact that they were able to get some tight end depth with James Mitchell from Virginia Tech. Also, I like the fact what they were able to do with their defensive picks as well. Kirby Joseph from Illinois and Malcolm Rodriguez from Oklahoma State. Those are some nice, solid players that you could try to develop, and hopefully they hit some home runs on those going into the next couple of years. But I have to say, when it comes to Detroit, usually Detroit is, let's just say, they're a subpar franchise. There's not a lot of times that I give Detroit a lot of props, but when it comes to this draft specifically, I have to give them credit. I really think that they knocked it out of the park with their first 3 picks. And listen, these 3 guys and Josh Pascal, Jameson Williams, and Aiden Hutchinson. These could be some cornerstone pieces for Detroit moving forward, and hopefully they pan out in the long run. But as far as my winners are concerned, I got the Lions and the Ravens.
Sorry, I'm not used to this mute button being over here. I apologize, ladies and gentlemen. I'm still working with the kinks with this microphone and whatnot. I don't know why I
Now,
keep
now,
swaying
now,
back and forth as I talk.
now it works. We tried working the mute button. We tried to get Kevin's mute button to work earlier, but it wasn't working because I was still able to hear him. But it's safe to say now that that mute button works.
Guys, it's gonna take me a couple of weeks to kind of get acclimated to this and whatnot. Again, I don't know why I keep legit I'm doing it on purpose now, but I keep like if you guys are watching it on YouTube, you can see that I'm like swaying back and forth. I don't know why that is, but hey, as long as the audio comes out clear, I don't really care. Um, what I was saying was, I said I find it funny because depending on what site you use to see these draft grades, it's kind of comical because some people are grading some atrocious drafts better than what you would assume. I mean, I'm not even being biased. Kyle can agree. I thought that the Colts drafted very well, and they hit every single need that they needed to within the draft, and they got better at multiple positions. 4 players on offense, 4 players on defense, each in pivotal positions we specifically needed this offseason. And then you go and you see the Tennessee Titans, and they got an A. I know it sounds funny because it's a division rival, but I don't think that the Titans got any better, and yet they're giving them a better grade than the Colts. You
Well,
go and you look at you go and you look at specific teams like the Seahawks, who had a relatively meaningless draft. They didn't get a quarterback, and they're getting like a B minus. Like, why? It's
well,
weird.
it's kind of funny. I think what the Tennessee thing is like they look at Malik Willis getting drafted in the third round. I think no matter which team picked him up, they were going to give them basically like a B plus off the bat just for that because based on how you see it, people will look at Malik Willis as basically a first round prospect, and the fact that he dropped all the way to the third round, people are going to look at that as like a steal. And I guess whoever you tell it to, they see Malik Willis as the guy that's eventually going to replace Ryan Tannehill at the quarterback spot for the Titans. Which, I mean, I don't know if Malik Willis is going to be like the greatest thing that the Titans have had at the quarterback position. But hell, I mean, when you listen to some of these draft analysts go over in like great detail about Malik Willis, they make him sound like he's going to be like the next great quarterback. But I mean, we'll see what happens. I mean, Ryan Tannehill could be the quarterback for the Titans for the foreseeable future. I know we had a segment a couple of months ago where we basically said that Ryan Tannehill may even be out of the door when it comes to the Titans after that abysmal playoff performance that he had in the playoffs last year. But it just really depends on how you see it. And that was despite the fact that A.J. Brown got traded, went from Tennessee to Philly. So,
Which I thought was a great move for Philadelphia. Shout out to the Philadelphia Eagle fans out there. Shout out to Dom, Gene,
little pricey,
everybody.
little pricey.
The contract portion is going to be probably the biggest part that you're a little concerned. $54 million guaranteed. I know that he is 23 years old, 24 years old, whatever it is that he actually is. Him and Jalen actually have a good rapport. They're personally best friends on and off the field, so that's a good look. But $54 million is a lot of guaranteed money. It looks like an Alshon Jeffrey kind of deal where it kind of ties you to somebody for a while. You're going to be kind of lost on the books for a bit, but hopefully it doesn't turn out to be like Alshon because he's a whole lot younger and a different kind of mentality. So again, kudos to Philly for pulling the trigger. That was another team that I thought had a really good draft. But, we talked about the positives. I think we got to talk about the negatives. And Kyle, I'm going to flip this to you.
Mm-hmm.
So, Kyle, we just talked about, who won the draft. Who do you believe had the worst draft out of all the NFL teams?
Kevin, this one was pretty easy to me. I look at the Jacksonville Jaguars. They were pretty much my sole pick as the team that had the worst draft. For me, it really came with their number one pick. And even though that I like Trayvon Walker from Georgia, I think he's a solid player. Um, I think it was a little puzzling to me, but they liked him, I guess, and hopefully he pans out with them in the long run. But when it comes to Jacksonville, I'm just looking at through their entire draft, starting with Trayvon Walker, number one. They had Devin Lloyd. He's a linebacker out of Utah. Not bad. I would say he's a solid piece late in the first round. And then when you really look at the rest of their picks, they didn't really have a lot of picks to work with. I believe if I remember the count right, they only had 7 picks in this draft. Um, they really just didn't surprise me. Um, none of these picks are really gonna pan out as far as I'm concerned. Maybe Trayvon Walker will be the one pick that hopefully pans out for them. But by and large, it's Jacksonville. Jacksonville has been kind of a they're always kind of a funny team to talk about in the NFL because, as far as I'm concerned, they're largely irrelevant no matter really what they do. And I think in this case, um, them going with Trayvon Walker number one, I think it caught a lot of people off guard just because I mean some people were having like Trayvon Walker going as like a mid first round pick, not a number one pick. So I think they may have made a little bit of a stretch with him in that regard, but apparently they liked what they saw with him. And then when I look through the rest of this, Chad Muma from Wyoming, Snoop Connor from Ole Miss, Gregory Jr. from I don't even know what this college is called, Owachita Baptist. I don't even know where that is, but are these going to be pieces that are going to turn the franchise around relatively soon? I'm not really of that mindset. Jacksonville's been a dumpster fire for the last couple of years, and you know I don't wish ill will on these draft picks. I'm glad that they made it to the league, and I hope nothing but the best for them. But I don't think they're in a situation where they're really going to be able to thrive that well, just because of the turmoil that the Jaguars have had for multiple years now. And even despite what they did in this draft, I don't think it's going to turn around anytime soon. But if I had to pick one team specifically, I'm going with the Jaguars. So Kev, I'll kick it to you from here.
So I'm actually going to go in a different direction. I'm going to go in the NFC. I got the New Orleans Saints, man. They only had 5 picks this year, granted, but I'm looking at that. I'm saying, outside of Jameis Winston, who do you have at the quarterback position? Jameis is coming off of an ACL injury. The quarterbacks that you had on the roster were not very well. Did not do very well. Trevor Simeon, Taysom Hill. I don't even remember who the hell else it was, but we know that it just did not pan out for them whatsoever. And I thought that they would probably want to address that need. Granted, I know there weren't a lot of quarterbacks in this draft that really jumped off the page, but I thought that that would definitely be a position that they would kind of tackle just in case Jameis does fall again. Instead they went with Chris Olave out of Ohio State, wide receiver, fellow Ohio State guy like with Michael Thomas. But if Jameis has an off year, if Jameis isn't healthy, how are you necessarily going to go and combat that need, that gap? It's a new coaching staff, new head coach, so we will end up seeing what happens there. But again, just kind of like a question mark for me. They did end up filling the tackle position that Trey Armstrong left, and when he left to Miami, and they went and got Northern Iowa's Trevor Penning at 19 overall. So they did have 2 first-round picks, but at the end of the day, where they were was Trevor the sole choice? Was he's the best available? I mean, that's kind of depending on where you had him on your draft board. The NFL.com grades their first round and day one a C. I would probably have to agree with that. And then obviously I'm looking at the rest of it saying they got Alontae Taylor at cornerback. They ended up getting DeMarco Jackson. They ended up getting from Air Force, Jordan Jackson. I'm looking at that and I'm saying, okay, well, you guys don't necessarily have the greatest tight end room in the world. Alvin Kamara is currently going through a lot of legal struggles. So outside of him and Mark Ingram aging, who do you really have in the running back room? In terms of cornerbacks, you obviously have Marcus Lattimore. Depending how you run Charlie Gonser Johnson, he could be a safety or a nickel. I don't really see them having a lot of depth there. So Alontae Taylor, doing okay there. Safety help. You lost Marcus Williams this offseason to Baltimore, so I would have definitely thought they would have went there. And then, at linebacker, you have DeMarco Davis, but who do you have outside of him? Cameron Jordan is aging, so then you go out and you draft a defensive tackle. What about an edge rush? There's just a whole lot of positions here that you look at for New Orleans, and you say you guys really needed to bolster up that offensive line, go get a quarterback, and kind of like rebuild the offense that you kind of have been missing over the last couple of years, and you kind of drafted all over the place. Again, I understand you only had 5 picks, but you got to work with what you got, and I thought that what New Orleans had acquired in this draft, it didn't necessarily fit the needs. In my personal opinion, that I feel that they needed more. So I would probably have to go with New Orleans for sure, having probably one of the worst drafts over the weekend.
Well, I did see a report before we started recording that apparently the New Orleans Saints are making an aggressive push to sign Tyrann Mathieu. So they're going to try to shore up their safety depth a little bit more with him. But
Correct,
I
correct
mean,
me if I'm wrong. We talked about it as free agency started. Isn't New Orleans one of the worst teams with available cap space? How
yeah,
are you
like
going to afford somebody that's asking for 15 plus million a year when you legitimately are trying to alleviate and clear your books? He just turned 30. You're going to lock him up for 3 or 4 seasons. You just also lost Malcolm Jenkins, your veteran, and you lost Marcus Williams. So, granted, he's a playmaker and one of the better safeties available, but you're going to give him all the money that you need to use elsewhere. I don't necessarily see that as a smart fit, but hey, I guess history is just going to continue to repeat itself when they go and sign players that are a little bit past their prime, but whatever.
hey, if they want to make the move, no, they got to shore up their safety depth. They
One player. That's what I'm saying, bro. They did not draft the positions that they needed. This made no sense. Congratulations, Chris Olave, absolutely dynamic player. Shout out to Tyree and Ohio State. You know, they breed offensive talent, and of course, the occasional defensive stars as well with the Bosa brothers and whatever have you, and of course Chase Young. But did you really need a wide receiver at 11? I don't necessarily think so. Was he the best available? Potentially, but again, there were other important needs that you had to address, and you went a route that just was kind of like, really, that's
they
what
could
you
have
needed.
they could have went with what was his name, Kyle Williams from Notre Dame, because he went 14. He was there. I that was the Ravens pick at
Mhm.
14. I mean that would have actually been a good move for New Orleans in that uh I guess in that case. But
It's everybody's
yeah,
personal preference. Everybody knows that the
yeah,
draft rooms for every individual team are different. Everybody's got
exactly.
different ratings from pro days and team individual visits. So again, I understand that all of these draft grades are personal and
Hmm.
opinionated, but I don't know. I also have like a little bit of a vendetta with New Orleans, as most people know. Shout out to Shea, my big Saints fan. That's my boy. But overall, I think New Orleans really fucked up.
Yeah, and who knows? It really kind of depends on how you develop the talent at the end of the day. So no matter what sort of players you get, if you could develop them properly, hopefully they pan out in that case. But gotta see how it plays out. But that'll wrap up the NFL portion of today's episode. We're going to transition into our last segment, which is going to focus on Kevin's team, which is the New York Yankees. Safe to say at this point, the Yankees are the best team in baseball currently. They have the best winning percentage, not only in their own division in the AL East, not only in the American League, but throughout the entire league. Um, at a 16-6 record, they've won 9 straight games. I think they just finished off a weekend series with the Royals where they swept them, and they've been playing essentially phenomenal baseball throughout the first month of the season. So, Kevin, look, the Yankees are your team. I know it's very early, but I gotta ask you, with the Yankees being the best team in baseball right now, how important do you think it is for them to be this good this early?
It's like you said. April just finished, bro. What is 16-6? That's 22 games. We got 140 to go. I'm not really looking too far into this. We can go on a 20 win streak from here, a 20 game win streak from here, and then we could end up losing 15 out of 20 the next, 20 games. It's way too early. Granted, having a nice start to kind of get into a rhythm is imperative for a team like this that didn't really make many offseason moves. For a team that is trying to prove everybody wrong. Aaron Judge is in a prove-it-year deal. Obviously, Giancarlo Stanton is trying to repeat the success that he had last year. Luis Severino coming back from injury is trying to show that he can be what he once was as our former ace. Garrett Cole's got a lot of pressure after folding in the playoffs. And again, that list of people that we have on this roster just have that chip on their shoulder that say, people doubted us, people kind of ruled us out. They said we were the third or fourth best team in the division, and look at us now. Now the list of teams that we have beaten aren't necessarily the most challenging. The Guardians questionable. The Orioles speak for themselves. The Royals haven't been good since they won the World Series 6 or 7 years ago. We played the Tigers and we lost to them 1 game out of a 3 game series. But again, we took that series 2 out of 3. These are not competitive teams. Now, granted, we're supposed to beat teams like this, so I'm not complaining that, we got wins in the win column, but where we struggle is against the good teams. Toronto, coming up a 3 or 4 game series there, starting tomorrow night actually. Can we continue that dominance? We know that Vladimir Guerrero Jr. has our number, George Springer has our number, and a litany of other players that are just very, very talented. Can our pitching staff hold up? A lot of times, Clark Schmidt, Garrett Cole get rattled early. Our bullpen's got to come up and settle it down, and then the offense has got to carry us. The offense has been the big part of our team's success over the last 3 or 4 seasons because we're out here smashing the baseball. Anthony Rizzo's playing out of his mind. Aaron Judge is playing crazy. Obviously, Giancarlo Stanton's had a couple of clutch hits as well. Josh Donaldson has played iffy at best, but he's had some clutch moments as well. Kyle Higashioka has been having an atrocious season. But I mean, again, you really look at it and you say, as a team, we are performing better than what people had expected. I myself included in those people that expected worse. But we're doing what we need to do against the bad teams. We're winning baseball games. And again, I will say this for the second time. We just finished April. The season just started. If we were sitting here in August and September and we were rattling off these wins, I'd be hyped. I'd be excited because it's all about who goes into the postseason hot, who carries that momentum. I'm not saying people are getting hurt, but it's usually around this time of the year where the first month is out of the way. We start making that break into the summertime. Somebody gets hurt for a long extended period of time. So I'm just saying, I'm happy we're winning, but I'm not going to sit here and say, oh my God, we're the greatest team in the world. I'm not going to be like the New York fucking Mets every single season that start to win and then become immediately irrelevant as the season progresses. Yes, I'm calling out every single Met fan out there because you've done it since basically I was born. You legit win always in the beginning of a season. You're like Dallas Cowboys fans. Oh, we're going to the World Series. Oh my God, the Mets are the best team in New York. You haven't made the playoffs in what, 4 or 5 seasons? This take is unnecessary, but again, they were also at one of the top records in the MLB for the last couple of weeks as well. So I will give them their shine because I will credit teams that win. But I'm not going to go out there on a limb and say that the Yankees are the greatest team in the world. I will say that I'm happy they're winning, but I will say there's a lot of baseball still left to play, and that's where I'll leave it.
Well, like when I look at it, this year specifically, their bats have been phenomenal. I mean, when you look at some of these games recently, I mean, they put up a 12 spot against the Royals in I think the first game of that 3 game stretch against KC. You look at the Orioles series; they put up over 10 runs twice in that series. They had a game against the Guardians where they put up a 10 spot. I mean, essentially, bro, they're like putting up like multiple field goals and like a touchdown on top of that with some of these run totals. So they're putting up a decent amount of runs and they're doing a great job early on. And this is really kind of the antithesis of what they were last year. Because Kevin, you remember when we were talking about the Yankees last year? Like one component of their team would be amazing, and then the other half would be just utter shit.
Always. It's always
Like
one or the other.
like their bats would be on fire, but the pitching would suck. If the pitching was great, the bats would suck. This is kind of a situation the way from what I see so far, it's fairly even keel. There have been some games where they've given up some runs, as far as the pitching staff is concerned. But by and large, the bats are showing up. I know when we talked about Anthony Rizzo compared to like Freddie Freeman, when we were talking about the Freddie Freeman deal before he went out to the Dodgers, I remember you were saying like you would prefer Freddie Freeman over Anthony Rizzo, and I think to a certain extent you were right. But I have to give Anthony Rizzo credit. He's been playing absolutely phenomenal in the first 3 4 weeks of the season. I mean, Judge, I think in that Sunday matchup against the Royals this past weekend, he smacked 2 home runs in that game. So he's
Yeah,
showing up really
Rizzo had
well.
a 3 home run game against the Orioles.
So I mean, the bats are showing up, and they're showing up in big ways. I think Gleyber Torres, he had a game-winning hit just about a week ago. I believe it was against the Guardians, if I'm not mistaken. So
Yeah.
the bats are showing up for the Yankees when they needed to. And granted, it's April. Well, it was April. Now we're in May, so it's still very early. I'm not gonna get you know too excited about where the Yankees are right now. They do have the best winning percentage in baseball. That has to count for something. Um, just by and large, the way that I always look at it is no matter what league it is, no matter what sport it is, that first month or two that you're playing, you're typically just making adjustments, kind of messing with the roster, seeing which rotations or which lineups work, and then you just kind of go from there. But as what I see with the Yankees right now, they're in a good spot right now, and that's despite the fact that you don't necessarily like Aaron Boone's coaching style, and I know that you've had plenty to critique him over the past couple of years in regards to his managerial uh, decisions. But for right now, they're in a good spot right now. But I'll say this: it's 1 month in. I remember when all the Knicks fans got super excited because they beat Boston the first game of the year, and they thought that they were going to the NBA Finals after their first fucking game. So I'm not going to say like the Yankees are going to go straight to the World Series just because they had a great April. That's not even close to reality at this point. But it's a good start, and that does count for something. Granted, it may not mean much in the totality of the season, but they're in a good place right now. And really, the main thing is just keep playing consistent. Granted, like you said, they're playing the Blue Jays. I think they actually have two series against the Blue Jays within like the next 2 weeks. So this will
That's gonna
kind
be
of
pivotal for me. That's gonna show me, all right, can we compete now that we're past the first month, the honeymoon stage of the year is over? Let's see what happens.
yeah, because I mean, if the Yankees are competitive against the Blue Jays, then you can maybe kind of raise this team's expectations a little bit more just because I mean, the Blue Jays are really kind of nipping on your guys' heels at this current moment in time. I believe they're only a game and a half back of the Yankees for first place in the AL East. So it's a big series for both teams going into the start of this week. But all in all, the Yankees are off to a good start. And if you're a Yankees fan, I just hope the consistency continues. That's really just how I see it.
Yeah, got a lot of baseball left, so we'll see what happens.
Yeah, but yeah, I think we've wrapped up all of our topics for the day. So I gotta ask you, just on the mic for the first time, how'd it feel?
Oh, I love it, bro. It's I've told you personally, I've told everybody that I've talked to, this is something that I've dreamed of since high school. And I know to most people it's just a microphone, but to me it's something that I've acquainted to as a dream. I know that Kyle and I aren't making any money off of this. I know that Kyle and I aren't really doing something that's it's an impact to society or anything of that nature. But for us, again, for myself specifically, this is something I've aspired to do for so long. And a purchase like this just always seemed kind of impossible or pointless between criticism, judgment from other peers, and people just telling me that it wasn't going to happen because where's podcasting going to go? And I mean, look at what everything that's kind of transpiring in the world right now. So for me, taking this leap of just getting a ring light, and then obviously now having the equipment between the laptop and all these different pieces, and soon to be decorating the office. Um, the mic is a big step for me. I could not be happier. Obviously, just got to make some adjustments and making sure that it's always kind of like in the right position. But overall, I could not be happier with the purchase, man. Shout out to Shure with the great company that it is and the great quality that this is. And hopefully, for those of you listening to the audio specifically, you guys can kind of give me some feedback on how clear this sounds. And I know that Kyle's going to be chopping up some different things, so I'm pretty sure he'll let me know how I sounded in certain segments. But overall, man, just ecstatic.
I couldn't have said it any better, bro. I'm glad that I'm just glad it worked out so well for the first time, just because bro, we were having some issues the other night trying to get that thing squared away with.
Last night I wanted to like snap this microphone in half, and it was
Yeah,
just a stupid error that had nothing to do with the mic. It was the audio coming out of my phone because
yeah, it was the input and the output. Like,
how we're doing all this stuff with Discord and OBS, and obviously the audio coming into my headphones, and then of course I got to put audio coming out of this thing. Guys, long story short, it was just a real pain in the ass to get done, but we spent a couple of hours getting it done to make sure that today went smoothly, and I'm pretty sure that this was probably better than we both thought.
oh yeah, it went smooth as far as I'm concerned. But all in all, the thing is, like, I remember like when I first got my microphone, like I was making little tweaks here and there just to try to make the proper adjustments, just to make sure that there was like no like any sort of like background noise or any sort of static. So, granted, it took a while just to kind of get those kinks sorted out with, but by and large, once I was able to get those squared away with, then it's just all right. I don't need to fix anything. Everything's good to go from here. And and and,
True.
and the thing is, what you'll probably find out about your microphone, there will probably like little adjustments that you'll probably like look back. It's like, oh, like we can make like this little adjustment here, this little there. But by and large, from what I heard, it was all good. It was all good.
It's all that matters.
So, Kev, I got nothing more to say on this side. Other than just appreciate you guys tuning in, whether it was on the audio side or listening or watching us on YouTube. I definitely appreciate the support. We will be back later this week. We'll have another episode for you guys, as we typically do. That's all I got, Kev. You could take us on home from here.
All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, Kyle already alluded. Appreciate you. Whatever platform you listen to us and support it, we just genuinely appreciate it. We might come out with a segment, kind of depending on the schedule for the playoffs. I know that the Mavs play tomorrow, which means they'll also play on Wednesday. If anything, we might have to record a segment Tuesday. There's a couple of things that we have ideas on what we want to talk about, just whether or not that's speculation or some hot takes. Going to try to spice things up coming up a little bit, especially with the playoffs and the NBA offseason kind of looming this summer. So definitely a lot of speculation and ideas that we have in our minds. But overall, just happy with the success and support that we've had recently. And with all that being said, guys, have a great start to your week, and we'll be seeing y'all soon.
Yes, sir. See you guys later.